You're joking, aren't you? It's the Teesside Chef. It's bonfire night soon, so I'm making this syrupy, treacly, rich, warmly spiced Yorkshire Parkin, and if you're one of those foreign types I've heard about and you don't know what bonfire night is, stick around because you might learn something. And I like foreign types because they all think England is a green and pleasant land where we all sit around London having tea and cakes with the Queen. Or the King now, because the Queen died, didn't she? But it has to be said that most of England is a post-industrial wasteland filled with human rubble. We do know how to make great food, though, which I'm about to demonstrate. Starting with 150 grams of oats, quick, porridge, steel cut, or otherwise, it doesn't matter. And I've blitzed them to a fine powder with my coffee grinder, but you can also use a blender or any other kitchen machine with a sharp spinning blade, I suppose. My blitzed oats are going in a bowl now, where they will be joined by 150 grams of all-purpose plain flour, a quarter of a teaspoon of salt, and for the spices, 2 teaspoons of ginger powder and 2 teaspoons of cinnamon powder, along with 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder, which must be sieved in because it clumps, doesn't it? And we can't have that, can we? Some recipes have allspice in them. You can go in with a teaspoon of that if you like, but I don't think this cake needs more spice apart from maybe a quarter of a teaspoon of nutmeg, but the nutmeg is optional in my opinion. It's up to you. And the dry ingredients must be stirred comprehensively to combine so they are ready to receive the wet ingredients, which don't start off wet but will eventually become so in a pan on a low to medium heat, starting with 125 grams of butter and 125 grams of brown sugar. Now, ideally, you need golden syrup for this recipe, so if you're a foreign type and you can't buy golden syrup, I have a link in the description below where you can make your own, but I suppose honey would work almost as well, or even corn syrup at a push. 75 grams of golden syrup for me, which I have warmed slightly in the microwave to allow for easier pouring, because this stuff sticks like shit to a hot blanket. And the most important ingredient for our parkin is 150 grams of British black treacle. Now, if you're one of those foreign types and you can't buy British black treacle, I have a link below where I'll show you how to make your own, although dark molasses will work almost as well, so I'm told. I've never tried it though, so don't get all litigious on me if it doesn't work. I'm going to cook this lot now on a medium heat until everything melts and combines. Yorkshire Parkin is often made to commemorate Guy Fawkes Night in the UK, of course, November the 5th, when in 1605 Catholic fanatics attempting to assassinate the Protestant King James I staged the ultimately foiled gunpowder plot to blow up the Houses of Parliament. Now, I haven't read anything about the aftermath, but I'll just assume that Catholics were treated equitably by the British afterwards, because ignorance is bliss. The contents of my pan are cooling now, and I'm going to prepare my cake tin. Ideally, you want a rectilinear tin, and I could have just said square or rectangular, but I've been at the thesaurus again. This recipe will also work with a standard size 25cm or 10-inch cake pan if you don't have a rectilinear one, and it must be lined with baking paper, of course, so I'm just using the frame of the tin as a reference to sketch out the shape of my cake pan, and I'll cut that out now, but I won't forget that I've got pencil everywhere, so as well as wiping the tin where I've drawn, I'll also flip the paper before putting it in the cake pan to make sure I don't get any graphite particles on my finished parkin. Gonna use the baking paper offcuts to scoop up some butter and grease my cake pan here before adding the paper in and greasing the pan again on the bottom where that paper is and all up the sides. And when you're finished, you could just throw all your waste baking paper on your local bonfire if you're in the UK, because that's what we like to do on November the 5th. We collect all the combustible material in our local communities and set fire to it for some reason while letting off lots of fireworks. I haven't read anything about the aftermath of such activities, but I'll just assume it's great for the environment because ignorance is bliss. And now we can put our cake mix together. Just simply pour the slightly cooled, sugary, treacly, buttery mixture straight into the dry ingredients. Time, of course, for another banal question of the week. Not actually that banal this week. How do you celebrate bonfire night? Do you spend it trying to calm a shaking dog? Do you do penny for the guy? Or do you call the local fire brigade in a panic because your house is burning down? Let me know in the comments how you celebrate bonfire night. Now, I gave those ingredients a little stir just to protect this beaten egg that's going in now from any residual heat that might have been in the syrupy mix. And I'm going to add 60 millilitres of whole milk to that. And that is all of our ingredients done. We just need to mix this now carefully and slowly until it's smooth, and make sure, of course, to scrape the bottom of the bowl plenty, just to make sure there's no flour lurking in there. And once you're sure the mix is fully homogenised, you can tip it into your prepared cake pan. I already have my oven set to 150 degrees Celsius, that's around 300 degrees Fahrenheit. No fan setting for this. You have to be a little bit careful with your baking temperature because the parkin can sink in the middle if baked too hot. If you suspect your oven runs a little hot, knock a few degrees off that temperature just to be on the safe side. Don't bake this parkin on a bonfire though, especially one constructed by the local neighbourhood scallies. They have no engineering experience with which to build a stable combustible structure, and will probably throw batteries or empty deodorant cans at it while it's baking, and that's not ideal really for a good finished product. And after 40 to 45 minutes it should look like this. It will be pulling away gently from the edges of the cake pan, and a toothpick inserted should come out clean, although the odd crumb here or there is nothing to worry about. Let it sit for 10 to 15 minutes before removing from the tin, and if you feel you need to gently run a knife around the edges of the cake first, do that too. Purists will tell you that you must leave the parkin now wrapped and uncut in an airtight container for 3 days or so before eating, as that will allow the flavours to develop and deepen. The cake will firm up and become all sticky. I have to say though, and this is just me, I prefer it fresh, slightly warm from the oven still. It is quite crumbly though when it's fresh, so if you want to eat it fresh, add an extra beaten egg to the recipe I've given you here, and that will allow the fresh cake to hold together a little better when you come to cut it into the signature cubes. This is an aged piece here that I have had from a test recipe, and you can see how it's a little firmer and cuts a little easier than the fresh one. I'll follow the general consensus for this finished Yorkshire Parkin by wrapping it in baking paper and storing it in an airtight container for 3 days, just in time to enjoy while I watch my house burn down because of the irresponsible behaviour of the local teenagers. I'll see yous next time, eh? Ta